Good evening, everyone. This is our weekly office hours for Race and Rights. Hello. Just waiting for some more people to log on, but this is our weekly office hours session for Race and Rights for Hillman Talk. Um, I hope everyone is having, it's Monday, so it's the first day of the week. But I hope that everyone has had a great day so far. I know after this, I will probably be wrapping up my night. But this is our weekly session. I am also live on YouTube right here on my laptop. This is our weekly office hours session. So for those of you that have been engaging with the content, watching the lectures, this is your opportunity to ask me questions. Hi, Antoinette. This is your opportunity to ask me some questions about the content that you've seen so far, maybe content that we have coming up, especially this week. This week, we are diving into criminal justice reform. We're talking about the amendments that are specific to the criminal justice system, the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments. We're talking about criminal justice reform. We're talking about the role that Black Americans have played. And then obviously the things that work against us and against our community and other communities of color when it comes to the criminal justice system. So this week is probably going to be a very engaging week. You guys are always really good about engaging with the content and asking really, really meaningful questions and really exploring different ideas. But I know that criminal justice reform is huge. And it's a huge topic that disproportionately affects the Black American community. So it's going to be some really good stuff. Hey, Smooth. Thank you for joining. So these are our weekly office hours. You get to ask me any questions that you guys want about any of the content that has either already been posted or content that is coming up for either this week or weeks to come. I cannot believe that we are at the halfway mark already. We are halfway through our 8 weeks together, and we've talked about a lot so far. So far, it's been a lot more historical concepts, cases that have really shaped the way that our democracy works so far. But now we're really going to dive into some in-depth systems that we see in our everyday lives. Again, criminal justice reform is this week as well. So that should be really interesting. I'm coming in just to make sure that I haven't missed any questions. Hi, Samantha. Thank you for joining. So for those of you guys who maybe have not been seeing the content pop up on your For You pages, I know I've had a couple of people comment and say that they originally saw my video when the whole Hillman Talk trend started, and then they didn't really see the content anymore. I know the For You page on TikTok is kind of weird like that. But if you are able to see the live and you haven't been seeing the actual content, I have a playlist on my page that has all 9 lectures that I've done so far, or all 9 videos, that I've done so far. It's right there on that playlist. So if you want to catch up, you are absolutely free to do so. If you want to build more of a sense of community, if you want a place that is not going to be so unpredictable as far as whether or not you're going to see the content or not, then I have created a dedicated YouTube page as well. That link is in my bio, so you're able to access all the information there as well. I think that it's really important to be able to access information like this, especially with everything that's going on. We're definitely seeing purges of information happening. We're seeing content that used to be widely available on the White House website going down. We're seeing books getting banned. We're seeing a very intentional suppression of, I think, really important information. And that was one of the main motivating factors as to why I even started this class, and why, none of this is behind a paywall, and it will never be behind a paywall, because I think it's really important for us to share this. I know the video that I posted last week about gerrymandering and voter suppression was one of, arguably to me, the most important videos that I did, because it's so relevant to what is going on right now and what we're experiencing right now. We have midterms coming up next year. We have three, very important special elections happening within the next few months. And I think we need to try to continue to keep people engaged in civics. I think there's a very big push on voter registration, right? Getting people registered to vote, but we're not really addressing the things that cause people to vote a certain way or cause people to not vote at all despite being registered to vote. A lot of that is just a lack of education. So I wanted to use this as a way to educate people on the issues that are probably the most relevant to them in a way that they understand, not with a whole bunch of legalese and big words and stuff like that, but really break it down into bite-sized pieces that people can understand and relate to. I think the other thing too is I don't think that we do enough work on addressing the barriers that people experience behind like why they don't show up to the polls. I know here, I live in Georgia, I live in Atlanta. Here in Georgia, they recently passed legislation that made it illegal to hand out water to those who are waiting in line at a voting precinct. That is one of many kind of undercover ways that people discourage people from going to vote. The powers that be, at least, discourage people from going to vote. And there are a lot of similar laws like that, especially in the South. So I do think that we need to dig a little deeper. Instead of shaming people for not voting, we need to dig deeper and figure out why people are not voting. And then from there, we can kind of do some problem solving, and meet people where they are. But access to voter precincts, when we talk about like our elderly community, a lot of them are not able to drive to precincts to go and vote. And we know from our gerrymandering video last class, right, that is strategic. There used to be a lot of polling precincts that were based in predominantly Black communities that were closed down during Jim Crow and the Civil Rights Movement, and even in the days since that. And that is very intentional to cut access. So now when you have like elderly people who need to go and vote, but they're not able to be transported back and forth from where they live to the polling precinct, that discourages them from showing up to vote, right? So I do think one thing that we need to do differently moving forward to see a difference in our elections, and I think better voter turnout, is to actually address the main reasons why those that do not vote don't vote. And if there are specific obstacles, then we need to address and fix those obstacles versus shaming people, because I think shaming people only further discourages them from voting, right? So I just want to make sure that there are no questions. Thank you, Pauline. There are no questions on any of the content. Another really important thing I think that I wanted to address as well is the SAVE Act, because that is probably the biggest danger to common day voting rights right now. So for those of you who maybe didn't get a chance to watch last week's episode, but last week's class, last Thursday's class, not only did we talk about gerrymandering, which is where we see a lot of like that redistricting that specifically disproportionately negatively affects Black communities and communities of color, but we also talked about HR 22, House Resolution 22, or the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act has currently passed in the House. Now it needs to go to the Senate. And if it is passed in Congress, then we can probably bet our bottom dollar that it's going to get signed in the Oval Office. But for those of you who are not able to watch last Thursday's class, the SAVE Act is going to disproportionately affect communities of color, but also women. So the SAVE Act creates barriers to voting by requiring people to show proof of citizenship in order to vote. Now, I know that sounds logical, right? Like, oh, well, if people are not citizens, they shouldn't be able to vote. Y'all, there are already safeguards in place to do that. You can't even register to vote if you're not a US citizen. So requiring additional documentation from people, I think, is overkill in a system that already guarantees that those that are voting are not illegal immigrants and they're not non-citizens, okay? What it specifically does is it requires proof like a birth certificate, a passport, a government issued ID. And I know for some people that might sound like very, yeah, everybody has that. Everybody doesn't have that, okay? When we talk about birth certificates, I don't know about y'all, but in the Black community, usually you don't even hold the copy of your birth certificate until you reach a certain age. And even still, like, you got to go ask your parents for it, right? So, I mean, I did not have a copy of my birth certificate until I was well into college. I had to ask my father to give me my birth certificate even as an adult, right? So a lot of us don't have access to that. When you're talking about the baby boomer community, which is our elderly community now, a lot of those people, especially in Black families or even Indigenous families, they don't have that original documentation. Some of that stuff was lost in translation. I know that they want you to think that slavery and Jim Crow and the Civil Rights Movement was like hundreds of years ago. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. To be clear, my father was born in 1950. And the civil rights movement, the height of the civil rights movement was right around that time, the 50s and the 60s. So he has lived, no problem, Coco. It's so nice to see you again. He has literally lived through that. And this is my father, right? The person that raised me. So many of our mothers, our fathers, our aunts, our uncles, our grandparents lived through those times. And they know, and they can tell the stories, right? So these are not, right, my parents were born late, exactly. So these are not like distant memories or things that happened in the distant past. No, these are things where like there are still generations of people living who lived through that era, right? So when you think about people who were alive during like the Reconstruction period, during Jim Crow South, during the Civil Rights Movement, right? In the civil rights era, a lot of those people did not have access to vital statistics. Those vital statistics were lost because, let's be real, this is also the time where a lot of predominantly Black and thriving communities were being bombed and terrorized by the KKK, right? So they lost access to those things. So now to say like, you cannot vote unless you can give us an original copy of your birth certificate is crazy in a nation that's supposed to be built on this idea of everyone being able to participate in their democracy, everyone being able to participate in elections. You're essentially creating like a modern day poll tax of sorts, right? So the SAVE Act also will disproportionately, and my grandma was born in 1927. Wow. Yes. So these are people who remember, and yeah, they don't have access to some of those things, right? So you're disenfranchising an entire group of people because they don't have access to these vital documents that shouldn't even be necessary in a country that prides itself on representation. And the primary like benefit of being a citizen in this country is being able to participate in elections, right? So let's be real, the SAVE Act does not have the intention of like preserving the integrity of our elections. It is a modern day poll tax. It is a modern day way to suppress communities and suppress those communities' votes, okay? But the other thing that the SAVE Act does is it's going to bring us back to a time when women didn't have the right to vote. So on top of requiring you to show documentation and proof that you are a citizen of the United States, your name has to match exactly what those documents say. Now, this is going to disproportionately affect women because usually women are the ones that change their last names when they get married, right? So imagine your birth certificate and or your passport has your maiden name, but your voter registration card has your married name. You can be turned down at the polls. Like if you're in line to vote, you can be turned down at the polls because your citizenship paperwork, the name doesn't exactly match the name on your voter registration. Again, disproportionately affecting women, disproportionately affecting communities of color, disproportionately affecting Black American communities, disproportionately affecting the elderly, the indigenous. Right? This is going to be scary, absolutely. But I think if anybody really like took the time to understand Project 2025 when it was being talked about, and Project 2025, I don't know if a lot of y'all were active on Twitter pre Elon Musk, like when it was actually Twitter. Okay. I remember hearing about Project 2025 as early as 2022. And I thought it was kind of like clickbait, propaganda, scare tactic type stuff, right? Because in my mind, I just couldn't imagine that this could really happen and that people would really buy into this and that people would implement this type of stuff to like bring us back into a pre-civil rights era. But Project 2025 has been in the works for a very, very, very long time. These people are very smart. They're tapped into the American like political landscape, so they know like what's going to work and what's not going to work. And if you read Project 2025, that is the goal. Okay, if you remember, in the first class video from last week, we talked about the very first election when George Washington was voted as president or elected as president of the United States. Less than 3% of the US population at that time participated in the election that named the first president of the United States. So yeah, Smooth, history is literally repeating itself. Absolutely. And those people that participated in that election were white land-owning men. So what you're seeing happening, even with House Resolution 22, the SAVE Act, we're seeing our modern day government pulling us back into yesteryear, into what they consider America's greatness, right? Which is a place where only only white land-owning men are able to prosper. Everyone else falls somewhere in, on the totem pole and literally probably at the very, very bottom of it. And this is how oligarchies work. This is how the bourgeoisie, right, of France, this is how they came to power as well. They sucked all of the resources from the rest of the population, and only like the top 1% had everything. And then the people at the bottom were like at the bottom of the barrel. For those of y'all that watched the Game of Thrones, right? We can kind of think about it as like the Red Keep. You have Cersei and the royal family who are living in the lap of luxury. And then you literally have like poverty and destitution once you get outside of that, like people living at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom, right? So this is a really, really pivotal moment in American history. And I do really think that we need to pay attention to what's happening. We need to be aware of the power that our vote has, because if there wasn't power in the outcome of elections, why would they be trying so hard to take away your right to vote? Why would they be trying so hard to disenfranchise you? This is something else that I want to kind of link together too as we talk this week about criminal justice reform, is this idea of the restoration of voting rights, right? So again, one of the main reasons, especially if you come from an immigrant family, one of the main reasons why people gain access to citizenship in America is so that they can participate in American society. And the number one way to participate in American society is to vote, okay? When you when people are put in jail, when people are arrested and they're convicted of a crime, they're not identified by a name. You now get a number, right, that you are identified by for however long you serve your sentence. And then once you come out, you've now been officially convicted of a crime. It messes with your ability to gain employment. It messes with your ability to gain credit, which America is a capitalist economy. So credit is like king, right, in this country. It messes with your ability to gain an education. And then on top of that, even though that person has served their time, you now tell them you're still not worthy enough to be considered a citizen of this country because you can never vote again. That is problematic. So imagine the number of people in this country who have served their time, right? Because that's the whole point of the criminal justice system, right? Well, even that is arguable how our criminal justice system functions and why it functions the way that it functions. Because if you ask me, our criminal justice system doesn't function with the intention of rehabilitating people, because we don't give people resources to therapy and job placement and any of that stuff while they're incarcerated. It's literally legalized slavery. But even if we take it from a punishment standpoint, once people have served their time, their punishment is now complete. So why then, when they come out of the prison system, why are they still not considered active and functioning citizens in our country? They can't even vote again. And they're at the mercy of whatever state they're living in, whether or not they have the option to get their voting rights restored, right? So when I was living in Florida, while I was in law school, and then when in my early years of practice as an attorney, there was a huge push for voting rights restoration for those that had served their time, okay, for this reason. And so if we did some research and we found out how many people in the United States have been convicted of a crime and have lost their right to vote, if those people had their voting rights restored, just them by themselves, that would change the entire landscape of politics as we know it. As we know it. And I'm going to take a wild guess that the majority of the people who have been rehabilitated and come back into society after serving time for a crime, I would take a gander that the majority of those people would be more liberal leaning. They would be people who would be more supportive of universal health care, right? Of student loan forgiveness, of a more, I guess, what looks like socialist type of society, where the least of us, right, have some type of safety, okay? Because they have been arguably some of the most disenfranchised in society, in this society. So you're going to see them vote a certain way because of that. So there's profit in not allowing those people to ever vote again. So all of these things really tie together in a kind of twisted way. But I do think that it's really important for us to have these conversations and to be aware of what's going on. Nothing ever happens by accident when it comes to politics. Everything works together in a chain. And honestly, most things in this country are backed by money. So if you follow the money, you'll probably see how all of this is flowing. We're not in restoration justice because those type of facilities help prisoners and programs would do so. Absolutely. So again, hey Trevino, nice to see you again. When we're talking about the criminal justice system, we really do have to ask ourselves, how do we see justice? How do we define justice? What does justice look like in the big scheme of things? Absolutely. We talked about the prison industrial complex, right? If you guys watch 13, which is a documentary that's available on Netflix, it talks about the prison industrial complex. The prison industrial complex is funded primarily by the top corporations in this country. Walmart is one of them. Walmart has huge stock in the prison industrial complex. Idaho potatoes, Idaho potatoes, and you get your little crinkle cut fries from them and stuff. That's backed by prison labor. Those are prisoners that are picking those potatoes. Okay. So everything here is privatized. Everything here is backed by money. And the prison industrial system, similar to the gun lobbyists, the NRA, are in the back pockets of these politicians. So when you start to see the privatization of prisons, and then, oh my gosh, it was such a disheartening. I actually, it was a creator that I saw on TikTok earlier today that was talking about how, when she was in college, she got arrested for a crime that she did not commit. And she ended up having to plea out. And she served like a couple of days in jail. And then she had probation and stuff for a couple of years. But she was saying that like she wasn't even given an option to fight the case at a trial. Yes, let my people by Desmond Meade. Absolutely. Desmond Meade is who was the head of the rights restoration movement in Florida. Yes, love Desmond. He's actually a lawyer as well. He went to FIU Law School. But yes, she was talking about how she wasn't even given the option to take it to trial because her family didn't have the money to pay for an attorney to fight the case. And that's how she ended up pleading out, because she was looking at either 5 days in jail or 5 years in prison, right? And this is the reality for a lot of Black people in the criminal justice system, people of color. Unfortunately, being an attorney and then being a public service attorney, these people are severely overworked and underpaid. So a lot of PDs are not even meeting their clients until they're about to go walk in front of the judge. And even that, like plea deals and the cash bail system and all of that is meant to disenfranchise Black people and people of color in general. So that's why I said like all of this stuff ties together in a very like twisted, weird way. And you have to do a little bit of digging, but these are the conversations that are vital to have before you get to an election, so that when you go to vote, you understand what you're voting for. Another thing that politicians love to do is that they love to use like really convoluted words so that you as an average person don't understand what they're talking about, right? Once I went to law school, that started to annoy me. It started to annoy me because I was like, you could have just said this, but if I said it this way, you would know what I was talking about. Because for me, like, granted, yes, I'm an attorney, so I have like a special expertise that a lot of people don't have. But my thing is like, if I had not gone to law school, there would have been so many things about my rights. We're not just talking about like how to be an attorney. I'm talking about like the rights that you have as an individual. There are so many things I would have never learned had I not gone to law school. So they keep moving the goalpost when it comes to education. So now everything is behind a paywall, because college is access to information that everyone should really have that's put behind a paywall. That's my controversial take. Okay. And I just think that there are some things that should be readily available to everybody. I'm not asking to be a doctor. You know, everybody can't be a brain surgeon, right? Everybody shouldn't be a brain surgeon, but everyone should know what their rights are as a US citizen. Everyone should know the power that they have as a citizen of this country. Everyone should know that if you get pulled over, you know, or before you get arrested, you should be read a certain list of rights. Everyone should know that you don't have to answer one question that a police officer asks you should they detain you. Everyone should know that. And no one should be intimidated to say or do things that get a certain type of information out of you. Like, everyone should know that. That shouldn't be set behind a paywall. All right, let me see if there are any questions. Yeah, so true. My father-in-law was born in 1933, made securing visas and passports almost impossible. Yes, Dr. Brenda. You know, immigration is a very hot topic right now. And one thing that 2015 and 2016, when Trump was first running, and he was running against Hillary Clinton, and we first really started to see this mass overload of like misinformation and disinformation, one thing I learned is not to engage in intellectual conversations on social media, because most people on social media are not seeking to be intellectual. They're seeking like some sort of virality, some sort of attention. They want to feel smart, right? So they're not looking to have like truly intellectual conversations. And it will only anger you as someone who believes in like facts to have conversations with people on the internet that can just say whatever because they have access to like a keyboard, right? So I stopped engaging in those conversations, but I do read comments. And so I've seen so many comments of people who are like, we have so many illegal immigrants coming to this country, and why can't people just come here legally, and why can't people be honest about the process? Do you know how hard it is? Let me reframe what I'm about to say. Do you know how hard it is to become a citizen of this country if you are anything but Caucasian? Like, let's just keep it a buck. Do you know how hard the immigration system is in the United States to become a legalized, either like a legal resident alien, right? So someone who is not yet a citizen but has the right to stay here and work, to become a legal resident alien or a citizen if you are not white and rich. It's almost like impossible. And we have to consider the fact that this country was built on the backs of immigrants and slave labor. So to then turn around and say that a country that was colonized, the original immigrants that was colonized, is going to cut off access to the rest of the world unless you have a certain pay grade and a certain color skin is atrocious. It's atrocious. It's shameful, truly, actually. My papa had birth records and a Bible. Right, exactly. When we talk about like our greats and our grands and our great grands, if you are lucky enough to have those generations, those people more than likely do not even like, some of them don't know when they were actually born, because vital statistics and offices that hold those types of records are fairly new in design. There are a lot of things that we take for granted now, that we've gotten a bit comfortable, that if we went 30, 40 years backwards in time, didn't exist. So while now you leave the hospital dang near with a birth certificate, that was not accessible about 30, 40, 50 years ago. So then to ask those people to be able to provide that in order to vote, like you guys know what you're doing. And that's the reason why you're setting those parameters, is because you know you're disenfranchising a whole group of voters. Real ID becomes mandatory. Yeah. And Polly, I do want to kind of note that a lot of those changes were a part of like the Patriot Act and a lot of the legislation that was passed post 9/11. I'm not going to say that all of that legislation had the purpose of disenfranchising groups of people, but I will say that when you're able to fuel laws with fear instead of prosperity and abundance, you get a certain result. So I think like even when we think about like they've been tapping our phones for a while. A lot of that also came out of the post 9/11 era and the war on terror and all of that stuff, right? This ability to kind of like invade your privacy under the very murky guise of like public safety and border control and foreign affairs and all of this stuff. Like that's all very murky argument to be able to violate someone's rights. And that's what the government loves to do. So a lot of this stuff started, especially like with ID laws and stuff, because I remember when I could fly back and forth between the United States and Jamaica with just my passport. I'm not my passport, my birth certificate. I didn't need a passport. And at a certain point, I was a dual citizen of both countries. And then right probably like a year or two after 9/11, I had to declare my allegiance to the United States, and I had to give up my dual citizenship. So a lot of this stuff is like 20, almost 30 years in the making. But I think now they're using it for more like devious reasons. Let's see, I see Smooth. That's the problem, because once we learn our rights as people, we wouldn't be able to be controlled. Absolutely. And I think what happens, this is a big part of the reason why there was a point in time when I played and toyed with the idea of going into politics. A lot of politicians went to law school and became lawyers first so they could understand how the laws are applied before they go into the branch of government that actually writes the laws, right? It sometimes almost feels like a very natural thing to do. One of the things that I did not enjoy about politics is how much of it is just based on your own like economic and job security. So if you are a congressperson, you really don't have an incentive to get anything passed or any meaningful change, right? Because you have to be voted in by constituents. And I have to find the name of the creator. There's a creator on TikTok that's really doing the Lord's work, and he's going into a deep dive of the different congressional reps, and he's showing us from their last election cycle how much money they made and the distribution of like where all that money came from. So he shows you like the percentage of money that came from PACs, the percentage of money that came from small donations, the percentage of money that came from large donations, how much they actually make in salary, what their net worth is, if they've gotten money from like corporations or sponsorships from corporations. All of that matters, because if I'm Walmart, I have certain political priorities. And so I'm only going to give my corporate dollars to the politicians that push my priorities. And that's problematic, because then that means your vote can always be bought, right? And I didn't like the concept of that, because even if I personally, like say I personally believe that abortion should be a woman's right, a woman has a right to choose, we don't have any say-so in her body, but I am sponsored and given money by a corporation or a foundation that is against that is pro-life, right? Now they just bought my vote. So anytime any type of policy comes in front of me, any type of legislation comes in front of me that has to deal with abortion rights or access to just reproductive health care, right? I'm going to vote against my own value system. And that to me was very, very problematic, because I feel like if you are going to be up on Capitol Hill, you are the ultimate representation of the people that put you in office, right? Even the people that didn't vote for you. Because it's always going to be people that are like, no, I don't really mess with her like that. But you still represent them. That's still a part of your constituents. And so there should always be a guarantee that if you're as long as you're serving in the Senate or in the House, that you are going to represent the best interests of everyone in your constituents. But there's a certain level of job security that comes with not doing anything. And I just didn't like the concept of that. And so I think that that's what we are kind of seeing, even when we see like people like Jasmine Crockett, she's speaking out, but she's talking about like Republicans that have gone behind closed doors and told her that they don't agree with what's happening, but they're scared. What are you scared for? If you scared, then you shouldn't have ran, because people's lives are being put in your hands. Like, today, I just saw a post where the Social Security Administration has been laying off people left, right, and center, and like at least 3 people have committed suicide. There's blood on your hands at this point, and the American people are relying on you to do things that are going to benefit their best interests. So if you're going to be scary and you're not going to stand up for what's right because you're afraid of losing your little cozy paycheck, you're going to lose it anyway. That's how I feel. You're going to lose it anyway, because I'm not going to vote for you again. I'm going to make it my personal mission to make sure that you are not back in office. But that is different. Polly, what do you mean? That is different every state. I'm assuming that you mean the voter, the rights restoration. Yes. But that in and of itself is a problem. I personally feel like that should be a federal mandate, that if we're going to restore people's voting rights, that should be a federal mandate. It should not be left up to the states. Because again, more than likely, the people that are coming out of the criminal justice system are probably going to lean more blue in how they vote. And so if you're in the deep red South, they don't want you to vote. So why would we want to leave that up to Tennessee to decide if they're rehabilitated, if they're rehabilitated people coming out of their criminal justice? I'm trying to think, because I don't want to call them I don't like convict. It has a negative connotation, but you guys know what I mean. People that are coming out of the criminal justice system, if they have been rehabilitated, why should we let Tennessee decide if they can vote or not? Why should we let North Carolina? Why should we let Georgia? Why should we let Florida decide if they should have the right to vote again? No. Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to make sure I don't miss anyone's comments, especially if you guys have questions. Our Congress is bought, so is our, at this point. Oh, wow. Well, I don't know if the live got reported, but yeah, I just got a notification that it's been restricted. This is another big reason why I am really glad that I shifted over to YouTube as well, because come on. Come on, this is crazy. This is really insane. Our Congress is bought, so is our judiciary. I definitely, I do think that corporate money needs to be completely removed from our political system. The judiciary, I believe, at least when we talk about the highest court, which is the Supreme Court, I do believe that we're a bit compromised right now. I do. No, they don't want you to educate. I mean, I don't know, y'all. I don't know. I don't know why I would be restricted. We need to go back to publicly funded. Absolutely. Absolutely. We absolutely need to go back to publicly funded campaigns, because it should be about whether or not your constituents believes that you can do the job that you're going up there for. Why should a corporation be able to say, yeah, this should be the senator from Georgia? Like, what? Why should a corporation's viewpoint matter more than the citizens that live in that state, that are going to be affected by the decisions or the inaction of that particular senator? You know, but this is also the reason why grassroots movements have such a big impact. This is another thing that I think goes in with voter like apathy. People believe that, like, you know, my little $5 doesn't matter when I donate to a campaign or to a candidate. It absolutely does. All of that stuff adds up. And it's not just the money, it's the movement. It's the social currency, right? Because that in and of itself has value. So grassroots movements are extremely effective. When you look at like President Obama's campaign, and even still, as much as we love Obama, he was a bit of a moderate in his approach, right? He's an old school Democrat is what I will say, which those people are more moderate. But he had a very big like grassroots movement, especially of young people at that time who really believed in his messaging. And I do believe that that's really what thrust him into the White House. We saw a similar type of movement with Kamala Harris, but I think it may have come just, a day late and a dollar short. And I still kind of have my tinfoil hat on when it comes to that election and the legitimacy of that election. But I'm going to leave it at that because my life is already restricted. States have proven that they can't be trusted. Give Congress and the Supreme Court. Yes. Term limits. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because there's no reason why Mitch McConnell should still be up there. I'm just saying. Like, you don't even, the working class of America are Generation X, which is what, like the 70s and 80s, millennials, which is the 80s and 90s, and then Gen Z, which is the 90s and 2000s, right? And then Generation Alpha is coming up after us. That's your working class. Why are the majority of people on Capitol Hill not the same demographic as the majority of the working class in America? That's crazy. We need term limits, absolutely. Does the right to work in red states affect the union workers or all workers? That is a good question. Right to work and unionization, those are very like nuanced concepts. When we talk about unionization, we're talking about like labor rights, which more funnels under federal law and statute. Right to work just says that right to work has more so to do with more so like the termination and how like that employee-employer agreement can be separated. And so there are some states that are like at will states or for cause states, stuff like that. But when we talk about the unionization of workers, that also has a lot of corporate dollars behind it as well. Because you look at a corporation like Amazon, the workers at Amazon have been trying to unionize for years, and they're bulldozed every single time that they try. So we have a lot of corporate dollars that funnel behind like the suppression of unionization, but that more so deals with like federal labor laws than statewide labor laws. 107 days. Yeah, exactly. She only had 107 days in a party that was already severely severed. And that is a big issue that I have too with the current day, like Democratic Party. I really believe if they want to see a significant term, and if they ever want to go back to having a majority in Congress and also seeing the White House again, they really have to change their strategy. And by change their strategy, they need to let go of moderate politics. The days of moderate politics are gone. They're gone. And they need to let younger people be in leadership of that party. I'm sorry. Like, they have to. And they have to also, I think, take a much firmer stand against corporate money in their political campaigns. The Democratic Party needs to back more candidates that are not funded by PACs or corporate dollars. Now, if they are going to do it, that's the find out in the next episode of Dragon Ball Z. I don't know. But I hope for the sake of the party, I hope for the sake of our current democracy, our two-party system, that they do. Because I don't know if they will see another one presidential election. And I don't know if they will see another comfortable majority, in Congress if they don't. Our federal legislature is tantamount to a geriatric ward. Like, I mean, that was a different, like, the people that head the government currently lived under vastly different circumstances than we do now. There isn't much that they can relate to in the lives of like everyday working class people. You know, I feel like that's the reason why we haven't seen much move as far as like the housing crisis, access to home ownership, the affordability of homes. Polly, I don't know. Not geriatric, but I mean, we have to, if this is my stance on leadership, if you're not creating strong leaders underneath you, then you're not a good leader. You're just not. If you are not able to pass the torch to another person to carry on the mission, then you're not a good leader. You're not a good leader. What have you done outside of just barking orders at people if you haven't been able to grow anyone in their ability to lead other people, right? So I think that we need to consider why the oldest of those in Congress bulldoze the progress that we could be making as a country because they do not want to see younger leaders. We have to ask ourselves that. And I think, honestly, the real answer to that question is because younger people are not interested in doing business as usual. They've seen the error of the generations that have come before them, and they are looking to do things differently. And the powers that be don't want things to be done differently. But that is going to be the downfall. Jeffries is not a strong leader for the Dems. You know, I would like to see him do a lot more. I think that there are some complicit actors in the Democratic Party. I think there could be much more fight in the party as a whole. And I think that that's the reason why people like AOC and Jasmine Crockett stand out to us, is because so few Democrats are pushing the needle forward. And again, not to say either way whether or not Hakeem Jeffries is a good leader, but what I do want to point out is that he is also highly backed by PACs and corporate money. So again, when a corporation is able to come knocking on your door and saying, hey, remember when I wrote you that $500,000 check? I've come to get my guts. You're slightly compromised, right? And you're slightly compromised, if not limited in what you're able to do, because those people again are coming to get their guts. So yeah, I would like to see some improvement in the very, very near future. I would like to see some younger leadership that really speaks to the working class, the people who are the most directly impacted by the things that are going on right now. And to be honest, you cannot shame people into voting for you. You got to learn, like, if you can't beat them, join them, not in the sense of like politically or policy wise, but you have to look at the hand that the Republicans have played and how they like literally like laid the building blocks down for everything that's going on now, and how they have galvanized their voting base. And you kind of got to give them some props for what they have done. And if nothing else, imitate, not in the sense of extremism, but imitate what they have done. They learned the language, they learned the psychology of politics. And the Democrats have not done the best job at that. It's a scary thought to think that maybe the only reason why Joe Biden won in the 2020 election is because of COVID and because of how scared people were. I don't know. Maybe if we hadn't gone through that pandemic, we would have had a second Trump presidency, much sooner at least. And then Project 2025 would dang near be complete at this point, right? Are they going to slow down or stop Social Security because of what Elon Musk stated? That is a good question. What I do know is, as of today, there have been about 4 Social Security administrative offices that have closed, at least here in the state of Georgia. Well, 3 of the 4 are mainly in rural communities, rural, deep red communities. So that kind of tells you who they care about and who they don't care about. And I think that it is kind of like a foreshadowing of what is to come. Obviously, I can't say for certain because every day brings something new. But I do know that Project 2025, one of the goals is to end Social Security. Absolutely. So I feel like we're probably seeing the beginnings of it. But again, this is why it is really important to stay maybe not tapped into the 24-hour news cycle. I don't encourage that, but to educate yourself as much as possible and realize that you do still have power. You absolutely do. Have these conversations with your family and your friends. Get civically engaged in the ways that you can that are still like respectful of your own mental health, right? And your own peace of mind. And hold your elected officials accountable, because election season is coming, whether they like it or not, right? Check your sources, please. I've seen that Elon Musk has already said that he is going to be pouring money into Democratic elections as well, which is problematic, right? And because it's Elon Musk, we are probably going to see even more misinformation on the internet. So please, please, please check your sources. Make sure that you are staying in tune with independent media as much as possible. Look things up for yourself, right? Because it's so easy to see a video and think that it's true, and then you share it with other people, and then they think that it's true, right? This is how misinformation and disinformation spreads. So just make sure that you guys are continuing to read, continuing to stay tapped in. With that being said, for those of you guys that were registered for the class, we're halfway through. At the end of the semester, I will make an official announcement later, but at the end of the semester, there will be a very special giveaway for one lucky student in the class. And I hope that it will continue to grow your knowledge, not only of the political sphere, but also of Black history, and empower you to know that your people have literally built this country on their backs, right? So this is like a pre-announcement to a more official announcement that will come later. Wait, we are in class. Yes, Polly. So this is office hours for Race and Rights, which was a class that I started under the umbrella of Hillman Talk about a couple of months ago, late January. All of the videos are available on the playlist, the Hillman Talk playlist on my TikTok page, but it is also available on YouTube as well. The link to my YouTube is in my bio as well. Sorry guys, it just gave me like a 5-minute warning. So let me let TikTok know we're still here. There we go. Okay. Yes. So it is available on YouTube as well. It's seeming like YouTube might be a slightly better platform since my live is restricted for whatever reason. At least YouTube ain't suppressing the content. Hey, nice to see you. Once class is over, will you continue to post? Yes, Antoinette, actually, I will. I'm going to pivot slightly from Race and Rights. Race and Rights, I've really treated it like it's a class. Created a syllabus, learning objectives, all of that. So it has been very in depth. It is probably not something that I'm going to, I know people have asked, like, are you going to do one for another semester or summer semester? No, y'all. Hillman Talk was a fun little trend that was never supposed to become this big, grandiose thing that it unfortunately became and then unraveled. It wasn't supposed to be that deep, right? But it was supposed to be a great way to share this knowledge with the general public. So Race and Rights will always be available on my YouTube channel and on the playlist on my TikTok for as long as TikTok is still around. But I am going to pivot slightly into some different content as well. I've been doing content for the past 3 years. I am actively pivoting in my career, so I'll probably be sharing more of that as well. But then probably more like current events things as well, kind of staying on top of what's happening in the political sphere, what's happening in pop culture that might be affecting us. You'll probably see some of that content as well. But again, Race and Rights will always be here. Will we be talking about Religious Freedom Restoration Act? That is not on the syllabus for this semester. I think that we do touch on religion a little bit on the syllabus, but I know we're diving into criminal justice reform. We just did voting rights. We've done our civil rights. We've done pre-Jim Crow era as well. And then next we'll be talking about some immigration. This is only 8 weeks and we're halfway through. So I need to go back and check the syllabus, but no, I did not put religion on there just because I wanted to make it a bit more relevant to what we see actually going on. Now, granted, there's a bit of a religious component to what we see going on as well, but I don't think that I put that on the syllabus. Okay, Greg told my brother about you yesterday. Oh, thank you, Antoinette. That's awesome. So again, this was never meant to be behind a paywall. It never will be. This will always be accessible to you guys, and you guys can still ask questions. I really encourage you to have great intellectual conversation. If you feel so inclined to share it with people that you feel like could benefit from the knowledge, absolutely. This is information that, again, I didn't gain until I got to law school and I was taking constitutional law and I read the Constitution for the first time in my entire life and started to really dive into it and understand it. And I just really think that this is not stuff that people should not have access to unless they have money. Everyone should know this stuff. So I do not take for granted anybody that has engaged in the content, that has watched the videos. You guys give me great feedback, and I hope that I am continuously giving you guys great content that makes sense, that makes things understandable, that makes you feel empowered, and gives you knowledge that you didn't have before. So I'm really excited to share the content for this week and see the discussions that we have. Again, we're tapping into criminal justice reform and criminal justice in general this week. But it is 10:02, so office hours are officially over. Thank you guys for joining. And I will see you guys tomorrow in our first lecture for week 5. Thank you, Smooth. I will see you later on. And that is okay. We go live every Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But catch me here tomorrow. We'll have week 5, class 1 up tomorrow by 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay. Thank you guys for joining. See you guys next week.